Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to G for G. I am your host, as always, Napalm Dawn, and today we're going to take a look at Taskmaster as he has been represented throughout several of the Marvel games dating back to Marvel Avengers Alliance. The reason why we're covering him is he's been showing up in a lot of Marvel games recently because we were going to be dealing with the Black Widow release at around this time. However, thanks to the Rona or the itis, things are being pushed back. Ironically enough, games are still going forward in their representation of the Black Widow movie, which is kind of interesting because when have we ever seen this schism between what we're getting in Marvel games and the actual movies? So in some way, maybe it's a little bit of a spoiler to be seeing the way things are going. We'll see that in Marvel Future Fight. But basically, to see the way things are going with the representation of Black Widow and Taskmaster and everything, when nobody has really seen the movie. I don't recall if it got put on hold because it didn't wrap and it didn't finish, and that's why we're not seeing it, or maybe the movie companies are waiting until it can actually be put in theater and not doing it for a home release. You could bet your bottom dollar in the middle of everything we're dealing with, if it did just, get a home release, I would jump quite all over it and watch it. There has been some information going on that AMC theaters have broken with, I think it was Universal, because Universal put one of their movies direct to home thanks to the situation in the world, and AMC is like, well, essentially you guys just breached contract, we're not going to run your movies anymore. And they're really, really, really adamant about it. They're like, hey, this is not a bluff. This is, holy shit. This is not anything that I wanted there. Just wanted to clear that. We are not bluffing on this. We mean this. We're not backing down. We're super, I'm like, okay, you try that, AMC, but, understand the world is in a very odd place right now and unprecedented, and things have to continue in some way, and to burn your bridges over this seems stupid. So, speaking of the itis, I hope you and yours are untouched by this, and everybody surrounding you, be it family and friends or pets, are remaining healthy. So, let's look at him here in Marvel Future Fight first. Fairly classic representation of him with the sword and the shield. The shield is a T, but it's a little bit of a different T than we typically see for him. This is a classically modeled Taskmaster, but at the same point, slightly upgraded to a degree in his aesthetic. The mask is a little bit different, probably a little bit more menacing, and he has these giant Thor uniform bumps over here. He's got some pouches, and Jesus Christ. Anyway, this sort of looks like what's on the shield sort of looks like those shivs that you hold in your hand, where the point will come out between fingers, and then you have a bar that you can grip. Johns in Pitch Black uses it, a similar one to this, and that's why I'm actually thinking about it, because Pitch Black was on earlier. By the way, Pitch Black, amazing movie. Saw it in the theaters. We'll watch it anytime it's around me on TV. But when Johns gets into the fight with Riddick in the Near Darkness, and Riddick has his normal shiv that he was shaving his head with earlier in the movie, Johns pulls out the kind of hand shiv that I'm talking about over here. So, he has Imitating Strike, which deals damage and steals positive effects. Adaptive Assault, where he attacks the major target for a stun, and then he splashes damage to a couple others for fairly high damage. He applies offense down, excuse me. Incendiary Arrow, which is his somewhat Hawkeye representation in this game. He attacks all enemies and does a blind, and he does bleeds to enemies. If they were already bleeding, then he does piercing damage, and his passive is Copycat Criminal. On spawn, gain offense up. A 40% chance to gain assist now on each mercenary villain ally's turn, not just mercenary, but mercenary villain. He has block chance, which goes up per any mercenary ally, gains damage per skill enemy, and then he gains damage with mercenary villain allies. He's got a war defense passive. So you don't really see how he imitates characters so much on this one, other than the Incendiary Arrow. Applying the blind is, of course, very similar to Hawkeye, but they don't really build up the photographic reflexes here in Marvel Strike Force. So it feels like they've taken him and gone a slightly different route than he is typically represented. So here are mercenaries in the game. Pretty much with the exception of Deadpool, all of these mercenaries are considered villain. However, if you... Who was it that had it? I think it was just... Was it Bullseye? Yeah. Bullseye is another one that has mercenary-related talents. So typically people have been running, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's hard to say. I don't remember which mercenary minion they're dropping, but Bullseye definitely should be in there. Killmonger's usually associated with Wakandan. Korath is kind of nowhere. He's not usually on a Kree team, but perhaps this can give him a little bit of a bonus because, target, he can pull in any kind of a mercenary with it. So, yeah, you've got some play over here. The only one that really kind of doesn't work is Deadpool because he's not a villain, but the rest of the ones you see on screen here could easily go into a Taskmaster team up. Here is his representation when he was in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Now, this is my favorite iteration of Taskmaster in the games where he was playable. He was a bit awkward in this game, but this is classically how he is. You'll notice the T is very defined as an actual T. He just seems really ready for any situation. He's got the sword out, the shield, the bow is back there. You almost wonder if perhaps Furion, modern representations of Furion from Final Fantasy II, owe something from Taskmaster. I actually don't really know who was created first, but Furion is similar to this in that he had the ability to use a lot of weapons, and like in the Dissidia games, he would switch modes, and he's just represented in a way that is very similar to Taskmaster. So he was a generalist, which started off with these abilities. Now, what was interesting for him is that the way that his photographic reflexes worked is that when he got hit by somebody, he switched to that class. He had the chance to gain an extra turn right then and there anytime he switched, but it could only occur once a round. So he had all of the classes. He starts as a generalist and can only equip generalist ISOs, but then if he got hit by a blaster, he went into this. If he got hit by a bruiser, he went into that. An infiltrator, a scrapper, a tactician, and then back to generalist. Looking at him over here on the Avengers Alliance wiki, You'll see that he came from the Memetic collection, which was the Taskmaster boxes. He had a passive of photographic reflexes where he gains the power of the attacker's class, and his moves change depending upon the current power. Tactical insight, chance to gain an extra turn when changing classes. It can only trigger once per round. Now, I forget if he actually switches modes, similar to Punisher. Now, Punisher, when you changed him, yeah, Punisher actually switched to the class. I cannot remember if Taskmaster actually switched into the class or he remained a generalist. No, I think he switched. I'd have to check. I really would. I think he did actually switch classes, but he was a member of, or he was tagged in the Avengers, Frightful Four, Hydra, Shield, and Thunderbolt. When he was a blaster, he had Sapping Shot, which withered distraction, deadly crits, exploit opportunity, turn the tables, and he gave his team blaster training. So essentially, he gave his entire team blaster bonuses, no matter who or what they actually were in their main class. He had the Bruiser version, which had a Sword Strike, which was adamantium, did bleeding, Vampiric Strike, which would consume bleeds to regain health, neutralized. He put a shield on himself. He gave everybody bruisers, or bruiser power. Infiltrator was one of his more robust ones. He had bleeding, and it went on everybody. The level 2 became the Hawkeye ability here, with targeted, fatal blow, ricochet shield, off balance is kind of handy. One of my favorites was the Tactician, which we'll get to in a second. Scrapper bleeds again. Berserker Frenzy, he exploits the bleeds. Winded Flanked, which was really handy. And then finally, Tactician with Trick Shot that did bleeding, a deep power on one enemy, and an exhausted, which is really, really strong. All allies get Rising Up and Build Up. I mean, nobody really did build up that much in the game. And of course, everybody got a extra turn if they did single target attacks. So this is probably his most powerful representation in any of the games. You had the bow-based attacks from Hawkeye, you had the shield-based attacks, which are Captain America, and then he had the sword attacks. He went in the game with a item called the Vigilante Toolkit that was basically built up of Captain America components, Wolverine components, and Spider-Man components. So, with the exception of not having a Hawkeye component over there, it basically, actually that was Moon Knight, that's right. Yeah. It's funny because the Vigilante Toolkit is equally apply to Taskmaster, but that's right, the Vigilante Toolkit went with Moon Knight, which is a little bit strange. And let's see if we can actually pull him out into a mission to see some of those old abilities here. Let's get rid of Quake. No, don't bug out on me. Oh, there he is. Let's see if I can actually get him. Nope. It bugged out a little bit. Alright, 1 second. We'll bring it right back up over here. Chances are it's probably not going to perform exactly. I would even be surprised if he switched classes. I don't think for the most part, anybody that's been doing beta testing for Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux has really even gone ahead and tested Taskmaster. Nobody talks about him typically. Alright. Let's see if we can get him with... Yes. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at what Taskmaster used to be like in Marvel Avengers Alliance. So he hasn't been hit yet, so he's in his generalist form. And I don't know if we'll absorb any of the classes from these guys, because I don't know if they're representing their class in the game code yet. Dance of Blood was always one of my favorite visual abilities for it. I like the way that that one performed. I think this is, yeah, that's a sword throw. One that's similar to Sif's animation. I want to see if we can get him hit, but everybody seems to be going for my agent. Oh, there we go. Nope, nothing kicked in. I bet you he's still going to be a generalist. That's such a weak death punch. Yep, still a generalist. Taskmaster, he had his benefits. He somewhat showed up in PvP, but for the most part, not really. He could have been probably one of the best counters of all time, because he literally would oppose whatever is currently the meta just simply by existing. So if tactician heavy groups were what was in the meta at the time, you could run Taskmaster and you can turn him into a tactician simply by existing, and then he turns your whole team into a tactician. So similar to the way Quicksilver shit on infiltrators just by his presence, Taskmaster could have crapped on teams very easily. Not necessarily because he would turn into the opposite. If he got hit by a scrapper, he turned into a scrapper, not a bruiser. But if there was a particular class that was running heavy in a meta, one of the reasons being that that meta gave that team a very heavy class bonus for some particular reason, then you run Taskmaster on your offense team and you ensure that you're going to wind up getting that particular class ability. So let's take a look at him in Marvel Future Fight, because he's getting a bit of a push over here with a uniform and everything. So again, very classic representation. The shield isn't tilted right, so it looks kind of like any pattern, but if you spun that right, that would be a T. This pretty much looks how he looked in Marvel Avengers Alliance, so they keep things pretty steady over here. However, thanks to the movie, you have the Black Widow uniform, which, again, the T on an angle looks like a pattern, but you can tell it's, you can tell it's intended to be the T here. He loses the T on the buckle, keeps the sword, no representation of arrows here whatsoever. The uniform effect gives him increased damage to superhero types and supervillain types. And from what I've seen, a little clip of the movie, he does that similar thing that Captain America does, where he steps on the shield to flip it back up to his arm. Skills: Dark Shield Strike, Wire Slice, Shock Bombardment, Arrow Rain, Masterclass Merc, Absolute Dodge, Flawless Strategy at T2, and then there's Photographic Reflexes. So it's represented in this game as essentially increasing his stats. Now, I don't think he's really meta anywhere in Marvel Future Fight. Even with the uniform, I don't hear people talking about him much. So that's Dark Shield Strike, which has the Captain America sound effects in it. That's Wire Slice, which does a bind. which essentially roots people in place. There's Arrow Rain. Masterclass Merc, which is a combination of a bunch of his different ones. However, it does have a strong similarity to some of the modern uniform moves of Captain America. And that's Shock Bombardment, which is the stun. Let's get him back over to the group over here. I wonder if I can get him into that simulator with the uniform. Okay, cool. Never tried that before. So that's Grenade Shockwave, which is a bleed damage and a shock damage. Still retains the Captain America sound effects here on Dark Shield Strike. Here's Wire Slice. Takes him up in the air for a pretty decent clip. Here's Arrow Storm. You almost miss it that it has an arrow attack. It's right at the end when he shoots down. The angle's tough. You almost miss it compared to his normal one. Burn damage, shock damage, and a stun, which is actually pretty good. And then here's his 5, which is Masterclass Merc. Again, you get the combination of all of them. A stun, a decrease in defenses, he becomes invincible, and standard physical damage. Now, aside from these games, he was also available in Marvel Heroes. And he had a few decent uniforms in it. He had this Udon uniform, which is what I would pick if I was running Taskmaster. And then he had this Age of Ultron one, which is legitimately creepy. Like, I would never in a million years have gotten this uniform in Marvel Heroes, because it sort of reminds me of when you have Japanese games with Oni represented in them. Basically, demons with masks and, like, big, huge bug eyes and everything. I don't like it. But Udon and his modern, I would. And as you can see here, his modern is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's pretty much how he was in Avengers Alliance. It's how he is in Marvel Future Fight. So pretty much kind of the only odd man out is, in fact, Marvel Strike Force, in that it just does a few different things. If you go over to his Wikipedia entry and you look at video games, in Marvel Heroes and in a bunch of the other representations of Taskmaster, he was voiced by Steve Blum, who's also done Wolverine in a couple eras. Steve Blum is a very, very well-known voice actor. He's pretty much he's instantly recognizable anytime you hear him. So he's done he's done Taskmaster in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, in UMC 3. He's done it in Marvel Heroes, which if you go to YouTube, you can search for Taskmaster recruitment videos. And these are just great, because these are videos you found in the game.
But lack the skills to make that dream come true? Do the voices inside your head tell you that you were meant for something more? Do you sit there day after day, seething with the need for revenge, but don't know how to get it? Then the Taskmaster Institute is for you.
Poor Hydra Bob.
Here at the Institute, we train you for a life of power and skill. You will learn 7 different styles of martial arts.
weapons.
and many forms of advanced weaponry. If you're smart enough to find me, you're smart enough to learn the lessons I can teach you. The Taskmaster Institute, when you positively, absolutely know you were meant for something more.
So, classic representation of Taskmaster. Classic Steve Blum right there in terms of his voice and everything. You found those videos in one of the zones in which you were questing, and you had to get all of the videotapes to actually get in the Taskmaster hideout. Funny thing, they don't build up, I mean, he's not chiseled, but they don't really build up the fat angle the way they did with Thor. And here's what I mean somewhat about the spoilers. So you have Marvel's Black Widow uniform, but then she has a team suit that is tied to it, which is... Where are you? Oh, it's above. There it is. Yeah. So that's the Black Widow snowsuit. And that one is, I think, the one that everybody's getting. There's a lot of good news about invisibility over there. And then you have Yelena. So that's her classic representation. And then you have one of her looks from the movie. And then you have another look from the movie, the snowsuit. So... yeah, it's sort of almost a little bit of a spoiler for the Black Widow movie, and who knows when we're going to be able to see it. I don't really recall if there's been a defined date on it yet, and I think Marvel Contest of Champions has this as a Black Widow too. I don't honestly recall. So yeah, there you go, guys. There's Taskmaster represented throughout some of the games that we've all played. So, Marvel Heroes, Steve Blum, Marvel Avengers Alliance, Lego Marvel Superheroes, again, Steve Blum, Tactics, Captain America the Winter Soldier official game. I can't say I even know anything about this game. Have to look it up. The now defunct Avengers Academy, voiced by Adam Montoya. Lego's Marvel Avengers. He's in the 2018 Spider-Man game by Brian Bloom, and he will appear in the Avengers video game as a former agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who runs a private mercenary group working for a mysterious employer. So, small piece of news on this. I have decided to bite the bullet and pre-order not the $200 version of the game, because fuck that. Absolutely fuck that. I don't care how much physical merch comes with it. But I did order the one that's a step down for it. I figured, tax returns came in. The ITIS check came in. I was holding off doing it because I just didn't know if it would wind up being a good game, because a lot of that early footage just made it look quite unattractive. But I was like, a little bit of free money now. It's going to be a while, but they're maybe beginning to start talking about beta access. And I said, one of the best things I could do for the people who like this channel is get in there as early as possible and get some gameplay out there and footage. So I did snag it for the Xbox, and it will be available on Windows Stadia, which is a joke, PlayStation 4 and Xbox. I decided to go Xbox just because I like certain games like this to get me off the PC and onto a console to do it. And it's available to me on my PC because all I have to do is just pull up the Xbox app and play it here if I wanted to. So that's why I did it. It has some versatility. The physical edition, the $200 one, gets you in 7 days early, whereas my version will get you in 3 days early. So, provided everything's going okay, the moment that I'm able to start playing this game, even before the normal version release, I'm going to get some footage out there as soon as I possibly can. And hopefully now I'll hear about some beta access and maybe be able to get that on the channel, because I think that would be pretty important. So that's it, guys. There's Taskmaster compared through some of the games that we've all played. I would show you Contest of Champions, as I think I have him, but Guess what Contest of Champions is doing lately? They're banning people, or suspending people rather, if you use an emulator. This is utterly ridiculous. Now, I'm going to maybe try it on Nox on my secondary PC, but Contest of Champions had been out of my rotation for quite a while, at least 3/4 of a year. I just wasn't playing it. I threw it back on BlueStacks on my main computer here and would kind of log in every day and collect my crystals and do a little bit of stuff. Well, one day I was suspended. I'm like, what the shit is this? So I emailed their support and I'm like, I've been suspended. I don't cheat. I don't hack. What's going on? And they're like, we'll look into this. And then a few days later, just almost as the ban was actually up, because it was like a 72-hour ban, it was maybe in the last 10 or 5 hours or so when I finally got the response that said, you know, we do it for suspect activity, which can be hacking, blah, 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 and emulators such as PC emulators. And I went, oh God, for real? You're going to crap on what could be maybe a quarter of the people playing your game? People who want to play it at its richest fidelity and graphics? You're going to dunk on them by banning them, which is probably the only game that I've ever encountered doing that. And the ban got lifted, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to push this and actually see what happens over here. And for a day or two, I still logged into Contest of Champions. Now, I didn't play, but like I logged in, and so that my calendar kept going without resetting. And then after about 2 days, on the third or the fourth day or so, I logged in, 600 some odd hour ban. And I was like, okay, you're getting uninstalled. I'm going to try it on a different emulator. Maybe it's something about BlueStacks that's really flagging it. But I think that's utterly ridiculous. Why Kabam is doing that and crapping on people, unless they think there is cheats or hacks that could go into the PC version, like, define key mappings and then set an auto macro. Like, I can't even imagine what, because, I mean, it's a Street Fighter-esque game. It's a reflex game, not necessarily like a planning game. I just think that's utterly ridiculous what Kabam is doing there. And for years, and I mean, I'm not kidding when I'm not using hyperbole, literally years, 2-3 years worth of using Contest of Champions on Android emulators on PCs, and then all of a sudden, like that, they're banning for it, which is the most ridiculous thing I think I've ever heard for that. And I cannot believe. I wonder if, I may go poke around and see if they've got Reddit and if people are talking about it on Reddit, because I would imagine the community would be in a pretty big uproar about this if that's their new stance. But anyway, so there's my Contest of Champion woes, along with some Taskmaster stuff. Peace out, guys. Have a good one.